AskReddit by JavaMama0002. Why did you get fired? My manager kept losing my class schedule. Worked at a Subway, I had class 2 days a week. Several times he put me on those days anyway. I gave him multiple copies every time. Owner took me off the schedule for calling out too much. When I showed the owner proof, he said it was too late and they already hired someone else. This was 12 years ago. I'm still mad. I always hated the taken off the schedule bull. Just fire me officially instead of taking the coward's route. This happened to me as well when I did not tell the general manager about a floor manager switching a product display TV to football one day. To be clear, she asked me, why did you not tell me? So she already knew it happened and was mad that I did not say anything. So I got taken off the schedule because the other manager did something against policy and I did not knock. I gave the fry guy an alcoholic beverage from the bar in a kid's cup. He used to hook me up with coconut shrimp and fiesta rolls. They fired both of us, lol. I wonder how Jamer is doing nowadays. A business I went to long ago was hiring and I got the job. Right after I signed all the paperwork, the department manager comes in and asks who I am. I tell him I was just hired as a temp. Manager says he never authorized any hiring and fired both me and my boss on the spot. I did not work for this company at all and they fired me. I had a similar experience. I was interviewing for a sales position and I made it all the way up the ladder through 3 different managers to the advertising director. Had a great interview. He told me I would be the future of this industry, shook my hand, led me to the HR manager's office, clapped me on the back and said to her, "We are hiring him. Start the paperwork and I'll see you Monday." She was pregnant, tired and annoyed. She looked at me with disgust and said, "We eliminated that position yesterday. We are not hiring anyone." I asked if the director or managers knew that. She said they should. What followed was an embarrassing 2 weeks of promises that they would make a spot for me and weak apologies from the hiring managers. Who off. Hired and fired within seconds. I was denied a raise by HR after consistently working 60-70 hours weeks, and my VP, who had supported and requested the raise for me, told me to stop putting in the extra time, work my 40, and spend that extra time applying to new jobs. Within a month, a meeting was called to mutually part ways because my work wasn't getting done. I was gratified to learn that they had to hire 2 people to do my job after I left. Edit. Sucks to see how much this resonates with people who have been in a similar situation. I left this job back in 2015. Thankfully, the VP is no longer there either, and good for him. I hear this story often in our career questions. It's weird, but I guess in it there aren't always logistical blocks like some other careers. Payroll might be done for our current period, but enhancements to the payroll software can continue ad nauseam. What's sad is that most of these stories skip the part where their VP needs to be pushing for you to justify this level of effort. The second he recognized he didn't have the power to get you what he deserved, he said, "Don't give it to him for free, and get yourself what you can anywhere." That's a rare level of grace now. For doing my job too quickly and sitting down the rest of the time. Gas station cashier, 3rd shift. Me. Why should I stand when I'm the only person in the store? Manager. It's more professional to stand than sit. Me. Then why do you sit in your office? I never understood that. Not once have I walked into an establishment, seen an employee sitting, and gone, wow, he's unprofessional. I literally don't give a fuck, as long as you do your job. This isn't why I got fired, but this is why I didn't get a job. I was 16 and looking to work at a Dairy Queen as my first job. My mom drove me to the interview and I was super nervous. She looked me in the eye and said, "Just be honest, and be yourself, and you'll do fine." I walked into that interview and when he asked me, "How long do you think you'll work here?" I responded, "Until something better comes along." OMG. My parents had to coach me on how to get a job when I started hunting. They were wondering why none of the jobs I had applied to had called me back, so they started asking questions about the application process. Turns out you shouldn't be honest on those personality assessments, at least not to the extent I was. They basically told me to answer as if I was another person. I talked my way into a job at a software company when they put a hiring notice in a local paper. I had no idea what the software did. I still don't. They hired me as a trainer and no one ever explained what the product was. I did a few weeks where I was trained on the software, but literally none of it ever made sense to me. It was like they were speaking gibberish. One day I showed up. A lady I had never seen before gave me a check and walked me out to the parking lot. No one even ever said you're fired or anything. It's one of the strangest things that ever happened to me. RIC, they tried to teach you SAP. I went to the emergency room instead of work. Came back with an ER note and they said we won't be needing that. Can you come with us? I was 18 and it was my first full-time job. I had pneumonia and a doctor's note. Came back to work a week later wheezing and puffing an inhaler. Got fired the next week. Jokes on them. I still got unemployment benefits when they tried to fight it. Doctor's notes are good things. I missed a lot of work because my wife got brain cancer. They called me in for a meeting and said, sorry, we are downsizing and letting a lot of people go. They didn't fire anyone else, including a co-worker who was caught fabricating reports for reporting elder abuse. That's retaliation. Illegal, at least in the US. I refused to come in 15-20 minutes early and paid for my shift. I was always 5-10 minutes early, but they decided they wanted me there earlier. I carried on as normal as I'm not coming in if I'm not being paid. Turned up for a 12 PM shift at 11:49. No one would look at me when I arrived, then was thrown in a meeting and fired for being late. Was out the door before it even hit 12. It was the only time I've ever been fired. You went out the door and straight to the Department of Labor, right? I built a snow scorpion sculpture. I used ketchup for the red glowing eyes and everything, on a particularly miserable day at a ski resort. The guests enjoyed my sculpture very much. Management weren't so happy. Sounds like crap management. Sad. I'm glad to hear you made the guests happy, though. His wife thought he was having an affair with the office manager. He asked me if I thought it was possible that he was having an affair with the office manager. I said, it's possible, but I don't think you are. I could see why your wife might think so too. I was 21 and naive as hell. Never should have said anything. He was 100% having an affair with the office manager, lol. Deleted. Don't be so hard on yourself. See it as immaturity, a learning moment, and be grateful you were good enough to see through the experience and learn. Kids do all kinds of crap anyway. I was a kid and just started at a local pizza place. I was let go couple weeks later because a pizza chef from Chicago had moved into the area and needed a job, so it was a business decision that I totally understood. Week later, went to go get my last check and asked how he was doing. The girl up front was like, pizza chef from Chicago? The only new hire was the manager's new GF. They sent me home because I sneezed and I was forced to get tested for COVID. Then when I tested negative, I was terminated for abusing pandemic policies to stay home. That has to be illegal in some form. I got fired for submitting my timesheets on Monday at 8 AM when I got into work. By policy, they were to be in by noon on Saturday, but my Fridays ended in the field, so I just did them on Monday mornings. My bosses didn't even look at them until noon on Tuesday, so it had zero impact on them. I drove home from being fired feeling relieved because of how unhappy I was at that job. Timesheets might be the worst part of most jobs. Sometimes they took me over an hour to do for the week because I would do different jobs for like 40 businesses. Then I would need to figure out what to input on my timesheet during the hour that it took me to do the timesheet to begin with. I gave my employee meal to my mother. That's literally it. I didn't like eating the food there, so I had my mom bring me lunch and I just gave my employee meal to her. Apparently that was considered theft, so I was fired. Worked in a DIY store. 10 minutes before my shift ended, I moved a pallet cage of paint cans, slowly, to the warehouse, and when I got in there one of the sides came off along with half of the paint cans, which spilt all over. Anyway, there was about 2 minutes of my shift left, so I moved the pallet over the paint, covering it a bit, and went home. It was all caught on CCTV. Most of the stories here are why I was unfairly fired. Yours is more fun. I was in my late 20s and had just gotten out of the army and wanted to finish school. I worked for a pet store as a groomer part-time while I was working on finishing up the semester. I put in time off for my finals week about 3 months back, and it was approved by both him and the assistant manager. Everyone in the entire store knew I was going to be focusing on school for that week. Jackass calls me in the middle of one of my finals and left me a voicemail saying I needed to come in cause they were one person short. I didn't even know until 45 minutes later when I walked out of class. He had called me 4 times, and on the 4th voicemail he left me a threatening voicemail. So I called him back and we argued about my professionalism. So I went into the store to have a conversation with him, which led to him threatening to fight me. I told him if he wanted to fight then he can take off his name tag and meet me in the parking lot of company property. Suddenly he became really fucking docile and just told me I was fired. So I sent in the voicemails to corporate and found out a few weeks later he was transferred to a different store. Forgetting lunch. I was 18, working at a mall kiosk with a manager title even though I managed nothing for something like $8 an hour. Hours painted on the door, 0 support or other employees to relieve for a break. The owner showed up while I had locked up to go get a bite to eat. Fired on the spot. I guess the owner can run everything. Stealing narcotics. I was a nurse 6 years clean now. Lost my nursing license though. It was a difficult lesson to learn, but it may have saved my life. Finally, had to scroll this far down to find someone who actually owns up to their firing. Good for you and glad you're doing well. I was fired as well earlier this year, not for narcotics but because I'm a crap programmer and they realized it. Because my job is moving to Lisbon and I am not. Because my job is moving to Dubai and I am not. Twinsies. Because I was reported for saying during a meeting that the current project is like a bunch of monkeys fucking a football. I don't suppose I'll use that phrase at my job, but it sure would be accurate. Because my job was eliminated. This was code for getting rid of you and hiring someone to replace you at half the salary. Their scheme was less than a stellar success because the person they hired was an idiot and could not do it. The customers got severely pissed. They gave me $15 case severance if I promised not to sue them. I took their money and still sued them for age discrimination, and won. Damn, this is a whole movie right here. It was 1973, working at Mickey D's. Redneck manager says go get a haircut, then you can come back. I didn't go back. Ponytails rule. Mattingly, for the last time, get rid of those sideburns. Comes back with 0 hair on either side of head. Their official reason: I'm not happy doing my job. The actual reason: I wasn't happy doing other people's job on top of my own and they didn't like that I spoke up. I'm an electrician and I was given my final warning for having an untidy van. It wasn't great, but I was told to tidy it over the weekend, which I did, and then still got my final warning and dismissal the following week. What really rubbed me up was that my boss was the biggest culprit for having an untidy van and I had likely learned this trait as an apprentice from him. Honestly though, looking back, I was probably sacked for other reasons and have since been aware that rarely are you fired for the reason that your boss wants you fired for. When they want you out, they'll find a reason, so best to self-reflect on your other failings than be pissed off for being fired over something trivial. 100% on the second point. I worked at a great startup with the most toxic manager I've ever experienced. He basically took something I complained about out of context and used it as the basis to get our CTO fired. Basically he caught wind that he might be getting fired, so he manipulated several situations and took things people said out of context and pinned it on the CTO. The guy worked as a scribe in the US Senate for a few years, so I'm sure he picked up some master manipulation skills along the way. He ended up getting me fired as well a few months later. I was in a really bad place when I took a job I knew I had almost no qualifications for. Maintenance repair guy at an apt complex. I have no fucking idea how to fix anything lol. Lasted a few months before they caught on. Tried my best to learn and watch YouTube videos, but I was taking the site along to do shit. Were you hired by a landlord? You must have truly worked at a snail's pace if you were too slow for them. Was on the edge of a serious burnout and had a sick leave for 2 weeks. The day I returned, I got fired. This all after I had pretty much given my all for 5 years working 10-14 hours every single day, working from home and not having a private life at all. That's how I learned that you should never give too much at a job. It's just a job and they won't thank you for anything at the end of the day.